welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hi there. Before we start the show, I have a couple of announcements. The first one is, as I mentioned in last week's podcast where we're celebrating 2 years of the podcast, I'm holding a special competition right now. The competition prize is a free entry into the upcoming Autumn Seasonal Cleanse, and the competition is open right now. You can click on the link in the show notes, or you can go to my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com/competition and enter there. The competition closes September 6th and the cleanse starts September 20th. So make sure that you get your entry in now to be in with a chance to win a free Ayurvedic Seasonal Cleanse. I also wanted to remind you about my upcoming Ayurvedic and Yoga Retreat, which is happening in the south of France, October 11th to the 13th. So that's coming up very soon. So for details on that, click on the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com/retreat. So there you go. Best of luck for the competition, and I hope to see you in the south of France in October. But for now, let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. This is Colette, and I'm welcoming back a guest today, Madison Madden, who is an Ayurvedic doctor and co-founder of the Pacific Coast Ayurveda. Now, we talked with Madison back in episode number 84 about Ayurveda, anxiety, and depression. And today we're going to talk all about Marma Therapy. And this is an ancient Indian practice, and I can't wait for Madison to tell us all about it. Hi, Madison. How are you today?
Hi, Colette. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, Madison. So I'm really interested in getting into this conversation on Marma Therapy. I've experienced it a little, but I know that you are a practitioner in Marma Therapy, and I would love for you to tell us about the origins and the benefits and share your wisdom with us, please.
Well, Marma Therapy is a very depthful and broad practice. It was the first reference of it was found in the Rig Veda about 400 BC or 4,000 BC. So it's been around for a long, long time. And, it's thought that acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, was developed from Marma Therapy. And actually, Marma comes from more of a martial arts background. It was traditionally practiced both as healing and as self-defense. Back in the origins of it, the priests and the doctors, and they were all one. They weren't differentiated. And so the Marma points were used both as, there's many Marmas that are lethal. They can actually kill you. And they were used for unarmed self-defense by monks and doctors and priests and things like that. So it's a beautiful, beautiful practice. It has... there's so much that we could talk about. I'd love you to tell me what questions that you have specifically.
Sure. Well, I think that's fascinating that it comes from a place where it could also be used not only as a healing touch, but also for injury or protection and possibly death in some cases.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So it's going back over 4,000 BC, 4,000 years BC, and then that it came from India. Is that correct? Southern India?
Yeah, I think that's probably as best as we can track it comes from. Well, there was also in the northern India there was texts that referred to Marma or Varma in the northern India areas as well.
Okay.
But Kalari, which is the main form of Southern Indian martial arts, that's very connected to Marma as a Southern India practice.
Okay, wonderful. So tell us, now that we've discussed a bit of the origins, what are these Marma points?
Well, it depends on how you want to talk about it, on the physical or the energetic level. Both of them are present. So on the physical level, Marma points are anatomical sites where basically muscles, veins, ligaments, bones, and joints meet together, or in Ayurveda we call them Mamsa, Shira, Snayu, Asti, and Sandhi. And they're intersection points on the body where multiple channels meet. So not all of those things have to be present, but multiple of them are present in all Marma points. But I think a better definition of Marma it's the point in which prana, which is vital life force, exits the nadis or the channels of the body. And in Ayurveda, there's 72,000 nadis in the body, or subtle channels. Mm-hmm. So it's where the point in which the prana exits the energetic body or the nadis and enters the physical body. And that point is a Marma. And so that point, it connects the intangible energetic body or the nadis to the tangible physical body. Mm-hmm. And when the energy of this transition flows freely, then there's health. But if there's disruption or stagnation, then health is impaired. And so this connection between the energetic body and the physical body through these Marma points is fundamental in health in all ways, whether we realize it or not. And so Marma Therapy is working with this transition, both the energetic and the physical body, and it does it through many different ways. It's not just through physical touch, it's not just through pressing a point, but all Ayurvedic therapies are actually built upon Marma Therapy, every single one of them.
Right. And if we consider that health is a flow in the body, it's a flow of energy in the body. And like you said, if anything is experiencing stagnation or sluggishness, that's when problems can arise.
Absolutely. And so these specific points, over all these years of studying and understanding this, we know now that these points relate to various internal organs and, through these pranic channels. And so you can target these points, to help heal, organs, the bladder, the kidneys, the heart, liver, and various different functions of the body through these points on the body. And it seems kind of like this mysterious thing to the Western mind, but it's actually really honoring the system as this holistic system where each channel and each organ and each dosha is connected through this whole symbiotic flow.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And so how many Marma points are there on the body?
Most people consider there to be 108 or 107 with one in the mind. And that's pretty accepted, although there is also thought that any point on the body that becomes tender or inflamed or there's stagnant energy is a Marma and needs to be worked on and honored like a Marma. Because a Marma, some people will say that the word Marma actually means a point of vulnerability. And so it's this point of vital life force, but it's also this point of vulnerability. And that polarity of that, is a beautiful and interesting thing.
It is, absolutely. And that goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago, is that it could be used to heal this point, or it could be used in martial arts as, a point where you could cause injury. And I know I used to study and teach martial arts, and we were introduced to some Marma points back then as well. But on the healing, we're interested in the healing aspect of it here today. And I would love for you to tell me a little bit more about how you use these Marma points in your therapies and with your clients?
I use Marma every day.
Right.
I find Marma, and I use it in various ways. Like I said, all Ayurvedic therapies. So let's talk about some of the typical or traditional Ayurvedic therapies. You've got Abhyanga, which is a traditional herbal oil massage. You've got Shirodhara, which is a flow of warm oil to the forehead. You've got Swedana, which is steam therapy. You've got Basti, which is, enema therapy. Mm-hmm. All of these therapies are Marma. Mm-hmm. So Shirodhara is right there, stimulating the Ajna Marma. Mm. And all of the localized Bastis on the knees, on the heart, on the neck, those are all working using oil to pacify perhaps a vata imbalance in those areas, right? So that Marma is, there's stagnation there or there's depletion there. So you want to use something heavy on it to nourish that Marma. Swedana, Nadi Swedana uses steam on different points of the body or different channels of the body. And then you've got traditional Marma therapy, which most people kind of think when they think about Marma therapy is finger pressure. Kind of, mm-hmm. Sometimes people will say it's like acupressure, because a lot of people now know what acupuncture and acupressure is. And mm-hmm. Marma therapy can kind of be described that way. Because you can use finger pressure and you can use finger pressure and, deep pressure to get more into the muscular system because some of the Marmas are deep in the body. And you can use very subtle pressure to work on the lymphatic system or on the energetic channels of the body. But Marma is a much more holistic, it's important to think of Marma more holistically than just these kind of points on the body that you can stimulate with your fingers and, there's so much that you can do with it for healing.
Right. And so are these points, when you're using them in the healing practices, are they site specific? You mentioned earlier that some of them are associated with certain organs. And obviously if these Marma points are flowing through the body and connected via the nadis and so on, are you affecting the entire body or do you generally go more site specific?
That depends on person to person. So sometimes, a lot of times I'll use Marma therapy when someone comes in with a very specific injury. Mm. So oftentimes right now I see a lot of people come in with repetitive stress injuries per se. So the upper limbs is a very common one right now. You've got people with carpal tunnel and, cell phone finger, cell phone thumb, they call it. Right. And, postural challenges from looking at the computer all day and all these micro movements, of our modern lifestyle. So we see a lot of people come in with this numbing of the arms and pain in the arms and shoulders and neck. And that's all very connected to a lot of those things. And Marma is really useful for that in a very direct way, just using finger pressure and using, certain ways of manipulating the Marmas physically through the hands and fingers. And then you can use different oils on it. So someone comes in and they're, hot and inflamed, don't want to use a cooling oil to pacify pitta. Or you can use Marmas specifically, a lot of times we'll use circular motions on the Marma. Clockwise generally stimulates the point and counterclockwise generally pacifies the point. Mm. So you can get very targeted with Marma using oils, using the qualities of different herbs and plants. You can nourish the points by using heavier things. You can pacify the points and, get stagnation out by using steam or using, like I said, the clockwise direction to pacify. Let's see, people with headaches, migraines, sleep disorders, Marma is wonderful for, and you can even use Marma on yourself for things like that. Right. And that's a very powerful and very common thing that we use Marma therapy for.
Okay, very interesting. And so some are site specific, but obviously if they're connected to the nadis, then there is a general flow around the body. And also they must be affecting the koshas of the body.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say, there's every Marma is affecting a specific region or a specific organ, but it's a holistic system. So when there's stagnation in a point, your whole system is going to feel that. It's like when you have a snag in a sweater. Mm-hmm. You snag in the sweater, but the whole knitting system is affected by it, right?
Right.
So when you heal the stagnation or the depletion in one point of the body, then it tends to have a whole domino effect on the entire nervous system and the whole lymphatic system, the circulation, all these systems that, in a medical way, we tend to think of them as separate systems, but they're not. They're very interconnected, especially when you look at it through the lens of Marma, where it's this intersection of all these channels, right? Mm-hmm. So the Marma point tends to be the intersection of a lot of these systems that in a traditional medical perspective, we tend to think of as separate.
Right, exactly. So when you have a client coming in, and would you use this, and I know it's an individual and tailored to each person, but would you use this as part of a cleanse, or would you use it in individual therapies as well?
Absolutely, both. Mm-hmm. I use Marma a lot for people that come in regularly with various different conditions and disorders, and we'll do Marma therapy to address it. But I'll also use it as part of panchakarma. And in fact, the entire cleanse is, you can kind of bring back to Marma, because when you're doing a panchakarma and you're working, the first thing that you're working on when you're cleansing is you have to get the Agni, the digestive metabolism, functioning, right? Mm-hmm. And Agni is a Marma in the body. Right. And so our Nabi is the Marma, which corresponds to the Agni. And so the first thing that you're doing is you're healing the Nabi, Marma, by increasing the Agni in the system. And then, all the points that the ama, or the toxicity, has accumulated in the body, whether that's just in the gastrointestinal tract, or whether that's deeply seated in the joints or in the heart or in the channels, right? So there's generally a localization of a condition, and there will be a Marma point involved there. And so that's part of, clearing the stagnation in that and getting it back into the gastrointestinal tract to be purged through a panchakarma procedure like Basti or Varechana. Right. And you've got the Marmas there that are being stimulated through a Basti. You've got the point there that is associated with Vata. And so the whole panchakarma procedure, if you look at it through the lens of Marma, is happening completely.
Right. It's happening all the time in the therapies, even if you're focusing on the points or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of an interesting thing in the Ayurvedic community, because Marma is something that people have a lot of interest in right now. But it's kind of this mysterious practice that a lot of people don't know a whole lot about, because it's kind of a lot of the knowledge was kept in secret for a long time. And a lot of, there was Ayurvedic acupuncture back in the day, but those texts were destroyed. And so this is kind of an emerging part of the Ayurvedic perspective and the Ayurvedic healing that is kind of mysterious and beautiful. And a lot of people are taking interest in it, but don't really know how to really understand it until you get really deeper into it.
Right. And this is what I'd love to talk a little bit about, the different therapies now, and what you're using or how you're stimulating those for those practitioners or therapists out there who are doing it, or for people who just want the knowledge of it. Say, for example, with the Basti, with the enema that you're using during panchakarma, maybe to pacify Vata, would there be certain oils that you would use individual to each person? would there be anything specific that you would do in order to pacify or stimulate that Marma point?
Yeah, you always want to custom tailor it. Basti in general is a therapy for pacifying vata. And so generally sesame oil-based oil is used, thylam is used. But you can target it based on what the person's condition is or what systems of the body are affected. And so if you need something that's, extra building or extra grounding, or, there's a little bit of pitta involved, then you could use something that has a little bit, that's not as warming. So a lot of the traditional oils that we see, you can just use sesame oil, but you can also use herbal oils like Balashwagandhi or Sahasrara Thailam. Some people I know use castor oil. There's many different oils that you use, but of course it's always targeted to the individual. But you always want to bring it back to the qualities of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what a Marma therapist is really good at, is using learning how to move, add, or remove pranic energy to achieve the desired outcome that we're trying to get in the body. That's what a Marma therapist is doing.
Right, exactly. And so doing that with the therapies and the oils or the products that you're using. So castor oil, I guess, it's a heavier oil. It's a stickier oil.
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas sesame would be more heating oil, coconut, more cooling, and so on.
Yeah, and you can use herbs and herbal oils. You can use essential oils. You can use pastes.
Yes.
One of the things I use a lot when someone comes in with a migraine or a headache is I make a sandalwood paste. Put it on the marmas on the forehead and the temples. That's called lepam in Ayurveda.
Okay, beautiful. And sandalwood is so cooling.
Yes, exactly.
That's wonderful.
You can use kapha pacifying oils for Marma points that there is stagnation in. So a good one, you've got a point right between the thumb and the index finger, right in there's a sensitive point right there in that meaty tissue. And sometimes there can be stagnation there that correlates to the lungs and the heart. And you can use kapha pacifying oils like eucalyptus on that point. Same things, around the lungs and the heart. Often if there's excess congestion or things like that, you can use kapha pacifying oils, or you can use steam, nadi swedna, which is, a localized steam you can use on points like that.
Wonderful. And then Shirodhara that you mentioned earlier, would this be one of the key Marma points, or is there a more powerful Marma points than others?
Good question. Yes. There are. Yes, in Shirodhara, the Ajna Marma, or the Stapani Marma, is a very powerful point on the body because it is the seat of the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland affects so many systems of the body through your hormonal system, your fight or flight, your whole central nervous system. So the pituitary gland is such a powerful system in the body. And so Shirodhara is affecting that Marma point in a very intense way. But Shirodhara is not the only way to stimulate that point. You can use different qualities on it. Shirodhara is a very popular therapy, and it can be done on most people, but sometimes Shirodhara is too heavy for people or too warm for people. So that's something like Chakradhara, which is buttermilk, a cool Shirodhara that's done on the head. And so that stimulates that Marma point, but it has a very different quality to it. And you can stimulate it, like I said, through pastes or finger pressure. You can even stimulate that Marma through meditation and yoga. And Marma points aren't just stimulated through touch. they're stimulated with the mind as well.
Wonderful. So I'd love to explore that a little bit more, because people could do this themselves and stimulate their own Marma points.
Absolutely. If you look at, this is something that people don't usually realize, but all yoga asanas are stimulating Marma points. There really is no separation between Marma and yoga. So let's look at bow pose. You're down on your abdomen, and you reach back and you reach to your ankles with your hands, and you pull up into kind of a bow, right? Mm-hmm. And you're balancing right there on the Marmas, right on your abdomen and chest.
Right.
And sometimes people will have you breathe and rock back and forth, and you're rocking back and forth between the Hridaya Marma, the heart Marma, and the Nabhi Marma. There's asanas like shoulder stand, where you're balancing on the point on the back of the head, which, funny enough, stimulates the Agni, stimulates digestion. So you can look at every single asana and look and see, which Marmas am I stimulating here?
Wonderful. And through meditation also, and how about through pranayama? With like alternate nostril breathing through the nostrils, through
yes, absolutely.
Ida and Pingala. Mm-hmm.
Yep, you've got through a meditation, you generally are, your yoga is traditionally meant to prepare the body for meditation. So you're preparing the body physically, you're stimulating different Marmas, opening different channels, right? You get all of that set up, and then you sit down and you do some pranayama. And there are actually Marmas in the mouth that are stimulated through pranayama. So yogis will use their tongue in different ways. So sometimes yogis will stimulate the very top palate of the mouth with the tongue, and there's a Marma there. It stimulates the pituitary gland. Different mouth postures, where, let's say, just even relaxing the jaw will help relax the Marma at the very base, where you can feel your jaw connects to the ear.
Oh, yes.
That's a very important Marma.
Yes.
There.
That can get very tight area.
Very tight area, and that affects the whole nervous system, because that's a very superficial point of the vagus nerve. So all of these practices are, you can kind of start to see the connection between all of them. And then when you sit in meditation and you focus your attention either at the third eye, at the Ajna Marma, or up towards the pineal, which is the Adipati Marma at the top of the head. Or you can focus your attention on the breath or on different points of the body, different chakras. Each chakra is corresponding with a Marma point, and those are some of the most important Marmas on the whole body.
Right, exactly. And, this is the good news, is that you can access these Marmas yourself through different mindfulness techniques. And there must be a link between the mudras and the Marmas as well.
Yeah, you could say that, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And, this is a good reminder or introduction for people that are listening that might not know this. But, I mentioned earlier the 72,000 nadis in the body. And that number is not random. It doesn't just come from nowhere.
Right.
The subtle channels, the pranic channels in the body, each one connects back to the chakras and the petals of each chakra, and they all connect to one another. When you add those all up, you can actually do it. You can actually do the math. You add them all up and it equals 72,000. And so the fingertips, which are where mudras are generally utilized, are very connected to specific nadis or specific channels. In Chinese medicine, a channel ends at the fingertip and then a new one begins. And and so the fingertips are very, very sensitive for transmitting this pranic energy that we're talking about. And so you can utilize that to work on specific channels, specific systems, specific mind states. A practitioner can utilize mudra to sensitize their fingertips so that when they're doing something like Marma Therapy, they are utilizing their fingertips in a very, sensitized way and open and receiving to the energy that's there in the body, or pulse reading or things like that.
Right. It's so beautiful because it really allows the practitioner or healer to, I guess, influence the flow of prana through the gross physical body and the subtle body.
Absolutely.
So, and using that flow to restore health. Sorry.
Right. Oh, no, I just wanted to say that, it's a important thing to remember that those two things are not separate, that, because of our confines of language, we like to talk about the physical and the energetic body being separate, but they're really not. They're part of the same system. And these points, these Marma points, act as kind of the gateway between, those two sides of our experience as human beings.
Right. Not only the body and the mind, but also, and even, I guess, as you become more sensitive and more aware to consciousness, it's an access point to consciousness.
Absolutely. Yep.
Beautiful.
And, when there's stagnation or pain or injury to these marmas, that's a really great way of putting it, because it's actually, there is a blockage to one's experience of consciousness.
Right.
And that's, the healing of that really is where healing in general lies. So oftentimes when you're working with Marma Therapy, there will be memories or emotion that gets built up in a Marma point. Oftentimes I'll work on a Marma and someone will have a memory of childhood that they hadn't had. They have literally never even consciously remembered.
Wow.
And that happens a lot.
That's amazing. So advice for people out there who are interested in this for themselves, Madison, and if they're interested in doing some Marma Therapy, what are your suggestions? And then we'll talk about, I know you provided there at Pacific Coast Ayurveda, but what they would look for if they wanted to go to a therapist.
Well, the first thing I would do for just, self-application of Marma is yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And because like we talked about earlier, that has a direct effect on the channels of the body and the Marmas. And so finding a yoga class and a yoga teacher that can personalize a yoga practice to yourself. And then ultimately having a home yoga practice and a home breathing practice and meditation practice is an effective way of utilizing the Marmas. But then you can learn to use the Marmas on yourself through finger pressure and things like that. So we talked about a couple already that are powerful, that can be self-applied. So one is that meaty point on your hand between your thumb and your fingertip, that when there's tension in the arm and the shoulders up into the head, headache and things like that, that point can be stimulated.
Okay, can I ask you, just sorry to interrupt you, to clarify that. So if your palm is facing up between your thumb and your index finger, is that correct? That meaty point at the base of your thumb?
Yeah, you can take your thumb and your middle finger, that's how I like to do it, and on both sides of that meaty point, you can put pressure, and you'll find a tender point there. On the front, one's on the front side, one's on the back side of the hand, and you kind of squeeze together. Can you feel that?
Oh, yes, I can feel it. Yes, it's tender.
That's kurcha.
Okay.
Kurcha.
That's for the shoulders.
It works the lungs, the reproductive organs. It will pacify certain types of headaches and tension in the arms and shoulders. It'll work on repetitive stress injuries of the arms, like carpal tunnel and things like that.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a great one. Thank you.
For those of us that work a lot on the computer and on the cell phone, that